Hello everyone, I'm Alex Dykes, and today we're taking a look at Acura's flagship luxury sedan. This is the all-new for 2014 Acura RLX. This replaces the RL in the lineup that's been there since they let go of the Legend. Before we dive right into this RLX, however, let's talk about competition because that's very important when we think about the Acura RLX. Acura's old flagship, the 2013 RL, was well known for its super handling all-wheel drive system. The 2014 RLX does not get that same all-wheel drive system even as an option, so the only way you can get this 2014 RLX is front-wheel drive. That really is important to keep in mind because you can't compare the handling and performance characteristics of this RLX directly with something like a Mercedes-Benz E-Class or a BMW 5 Series. Instead, the RLX really plays, as it always has, with the likes of the Volvo S80, the Lincoln MKS, and the Cadillac XTS. It plays in that segment of the arena rather than with the mainline German luxury players. Acura is well known for their elegant and restrained styling. There's not a whole lot of visual excitement going on the outside of the RLX for 2014, except for these multifaceted LED jewel headlamps. These are individual LED modules with their own focusing array, and then these two modules over here are the high beams, as you can see in the picture. They are very distinctive and quite attractive. Over here we have a slightly toned down version of that Acura beak that caused so many people to have so many complaints about the refreshed Acura TL when it came out a few years ago. It's been toned down a little bit on the RLX, and if I'm honest, I've kind of warmed up to it. I don't really mind the beak so much as I used to. Overall, the style on the RLX is not quite as heavily worked as it is on that Acura TL, which is very befitting of a flagship product. I find the rear end design more attractive and more elegant, but also more cohesive than the Acura TL, which is the mid-sized Acura sedan. And that's because the TL has kind of a jumble of shapes going on and a few angles that I don't really care for. But things back here in the RLX are very sedate, they're very luxury looking, so this definitely has the look of a luxury sedan. We also have hidden exhaust tips, we have rear parking sensors available, and our model has PAWS, which is a cutesy acronym for their all-wheel steering system. This is not an all-wheel drive badge, this is an all-wheel steering system. PAWS is Acura's take on all-wheel steering. So back here in the rear, we have independently steerable rear wheels. You heard that right, these don't steer necessarily together, although they can, but they can also steer independently of one another and independently of the front wheels. So they can both toe in at the same time, they can both turn left, and they can both turn right. Acura uses this not just to reduce the turning radius in certain situations, although the turning radius on the RLX is still a fairly large 40 feet, but they also use this to try and counteract the front-wheel drive nature of the RLX, but we'll go over more of that in the drive section. Under the hood, you'll find a smaller engine than last year. This has been reduced from 3.7 liters to a 3.5 liter direct injection V6 engine. This is shared with the Acura MDX, that's the all-new MDX, but power is slightly higher here. It's 310 horsepower and 272 pound-feet of torque. All that power is sent to the front wheels only via a 6-speed traditional automatic transmission. That's fairly average for this segment because the S80, MKS, and XTS all use a 6-speed automatic transmission as well. However, the S80 is the least powerful in this bunch, and we have a few engine options that really outclass this 3.5 liter V6. The base 240 horsepower 3.2 liter inline 6 is a bit smoother than this engine, but considerably less powerful. However, there is a 300 horsepower, 325 pound-foot of torque engine available. There's also a 325 horsepower version of that same twin-scroll turbo 3-liter inline 6. Over with the Cadillac XTS, we have a 305 horsepower base engine and a 410 horsepower optional twin-turbo V6. On the Lincoln side, we have a base 304 horsepower engine and an optional 365 horsepower twin-turbo V6. All of those options with the high horsepower engine are mated to all-wheel drive, so that's a significant advantage over this Acura RLX, which is only front-wheel drive. One of the common complaints about the 2013 Acura RL was that it was just a little bit too small when you compared it to the competition. That's been changed for 2014, and we have a car that's about 2 inches longer in wheelbase, several inches longer overall, and wider than last year. Most of that room goes to this rear seat, which was a tight spot in the 2013 RL. Front seat comfort in the RLX is excellent. We have standard power driver and front passenger 12-way adjustable seats with a 4-way adjustable lumbar support. These seats are easily the equal of the Volvo S80 or the BMW 5 Series with the sport seats. We also get an adjustable tilt telescoping steering wheel with a decent range of motion. Something to keep in mind while cross-shopping is that base RLX models get imitation leather rather than real leather on the front and rear seats. A common complaint about the old RL was the tight back seat, and that's been rectified with this new RLX. This front seat's adjusted for me at 6 feet tall. I have about 6 or 7 inches of legroom left back here. That's more than you would find in a standard short wheelbase BMW 7 Series. The seat bottom cushion is a little bit close to the floor for mid-sized luxury sedans, but the seat back angle is fairly comfortable, and overall this seat is more comfortable than you'd find in the Lincoln MKS or the Cadillac XTS. The benefit of being a front-wheel drive car is that there is a fairly small hump here in the center seat. However, headroom is fairly limited in this car because of the decidedly bucket shapes going on here in the outboard rear seats. If I scoot over to this far right seat, this front seat was adjusted for a 6'5" passenger I had in the car, so you can see I have a decent amount of legroom left there. We also have a fairly large and comfortable center armrest with built-in cup holders. So you can see there's no storage cubby in this center armrest. That is one thing to keep in mind. We have a ski pass-through here in the center. We have a button for the power rear shade, and these side shades are manual in the RLX. Our RLX is equipped with the optional perforated leather and cooled front seats. See, we have a new door styling that we haven't seen from Acura before over there. If we move over to the dashboard and the doors are a combination of an injection molded upper, a stitched leather middle, fake wood, and then harder plastics down below. But these harder plastics down below are not your typical entry-level car plastics. These are still soft, they're just not quite as soft as the upper plastics. See, the center console in the RLX continues the stitched material theme all the way down to, again, more soft touch plastics down lower. The dashboard is dominated by this large dual LCD arrangement. Navigation is not standard in the RLX, but this dual screen arrangement is. This lower screen is a touch screen, and the upper screen is controlled either by that touch screen or by this multi-way joystick here. We have dual zone standard climate control in the RLX, the optional cooled seats, standard heated seats. This is a little storage cubby with a power port. We have our shifter, 2 cup holders which easily carry the largest size you can find in a drive-thru in the US, sport button, no manual shift mode, you'll notice right here on this shifter, electric parking brake, and regular old brake hold. The large center armrest operates in a number of different ways. First, it slides back like this, so you can have easy access to certain items, and it also opens side to side in that fashion. If we open it up, we have a small divider tray that is removable to allow you access to this very large and quite deep center console that is one of the benefits of having a front-wheel drive bias platform. The RLX uses a standard 4-dial arrangement with a color LCD in the middle. It is controlled by these buttons over here on this new Acura steering wheel. This little dial selects those options on that small LCD display. Over here we have our cruise control and radar cruise control buttons. Radar cruise control is an option, as is the lane keeping assist. Over here on this side of the new Acura steering wheel, we have our radio controls, source, track, forward, backward, volume up and down on that same knob, phone controls, and the voice button as well. This is a very chunky and very nice feeling steering wheel. Over here we have our auto headlamps. And on this side we have all the buttons that control the various safety systems on our car. We have the lane departure warning, parking assistance, this is your usual traction control, and this is collision mitigating braking system, which automatically applies the brakes if the car believes that you're definitely going to hit something and there's no other way of preventing that collision. The RLX scores 8 out of 10 points in our exclusive Trunk Comfort Index because this trunk is fairly large, fairly well upholstered, and the trunk opening is decently sized. It's not quite as large as full-size luxury sedans, mind you, but it is a little bit easier to get things in here than that Cadillac XTS. Now, we don't have a full-size spare tire in the RLX. We don't have a spare tire at all, actually. So instead, we get a larger storage compartment under this load floor and a can of Fix-A-Flat. One feature that I do appreciate is a nice handle that makes it a lot easier to close the trunk on yourself. We're going to take a deep dive into the infotainment system now. If you'd like to skip to the drive section, just follow those instructions at the bottom of your screen. And if you're not watching us in HD, then go ahead and click that quality button on YouTube and bump yourself up to 1080 so you can see the detail here. Now, as I said, all RLX models come standard with this 2-screen affair. Now, the logic here is supposed to be that the navigation system is predominantly in this higher screen, and this lower screen is reserved just for audio and climate control functions. That's why this is a touch screen, so all these options here are touch buttons, but we also have buttons down here in this joystick arrangement lower in the center console. This is very closely related to the system that's in the new Honda Accord. It's also the same system that's used in the new Acura MDX. Down here in this button arrangement here, we have the nav button, phone button, info button, and audio button. Now these are direct access buttons for this large 8-inch screen up top. So if we hit the nav button, switches this to the nav system up there. Info button takes us to the info option on that large screen. Now we have a joystick with a rotary dial here. You can also toggle this up and down for various menus in the system, and it's click to enter. Let's go ahead and zoom in on these two screens so we can see them in greater detail now. I've said before that this two-screen arrangement used in the new Honda and Acura products doesn't seem quite fully baked. And while I have gotten a little bit more used to it in this new Acura RLX, I think that still holds true. The reason is, down here under audio source, you can select your audio source like your iPod, you can see your current track, you can go forward and backward on your iPod, and if you want to shuffle, that's under more. You can choose sound settings, shuffle, repeat, and screen settings over here. But if you want to actually select a playlist, you have to hit that audio direct access button in that joystick module below, and then up here in this 8-inch screen, you select iPod, and then you can toggle back, and here is where you can find your playlists, albums, genres, composers, etc. And then once you're browsing around here, we'll say purchased music, and then we'll scroll down to something. Now once this is playing, then on this small screen, you'll see that song information, and on this screen is where you would again choose shuffle or repeat. And that seems very disconnected. You can't shuffle and repeat from this screen up here, you have to do it on this screen down here. So you end up having to use both screens, and if you're doing that while you're trying to navigate somewhere, then it defeats the entire purpose of having your map up here while you do audio things down here. Now, that being said, this system is very fully featured, so we have complete voice commands of everything in this system, and I mean practically everything. So if you can see it on this screen up here, you can voice command it, and you can read things out. The nav system interface is very nicely featured, and it does offer local street traffic information. So you can see the small street that we're off of here, we have a green line because it does have traffic information there. Address entry is very quick in the system. The voice commands work extremely well. The phone interface is a fairly typical Bluetooth phone interface, speed dials, call history, etc. Not quite as easy to use as some of the touchscreen systems that I've seen before, where you can actually dial numbers on the touchscreen, because this screen here can't do any phone functions. The info menu is where you'll find various things like Acura link messages, the trip computer, voice information help, traffic incidents. This is provided by XM Traffic Data Service, calendar, and of course your clock and wallpaper settings. Now, if we go into the trip computer, you can see, very much like the rest of the Acura products, your current fuel economy from your current trip, your previous trip, those are automatically reset, and then we can click over to the history of the trip A every time it was reset. Over on audio, you can change your source using this 8-inch screen and the joystick knob, or you can use this touch screen in the dash to change your source. AM, FM, XM, single slot CD player in the dash, built-in hard drive music library, USB input. Since we have an iPod connected, it says iPod. The system is capable of providing enough power to charge high-draw USB devices, which is very handy. We have Bluetooth streaming over there. If we click over to the next page, you'll see your smartphone app integration, Pandora and AHA Radio. There's no auxiliary app required for these, so you don't have to have an Acura app to make Pandora work. For instance, you just have to have the Pandora app. Down here we have our climate control buttons. If you touch these buttons, it'll bring up another menu where you can adjust your fan speed. Over here you can see AC options, sync options. Temperature, you can adjust the temperature here or via those direct access buttons below as well. The shortcuts button on the 7-inch LCD allows you to save presets for various car functions. You have your valet there. Under audio, you can save presets for anything from a playlist or a song on your hard drive or your iPod to stations on AM or XM right there. These are in addition to the regular radio presets. Over on the climate button, you can choose particular climate presets for various people that drive the car. We have speed dials on the phone, and we have quick navigation stops, so you can just save an entry right there and have it navigate you there every time. This is also where you'll find your Navigate Home button. Overall, my impression of Acura Link has gotten better the more time I spend with this system, but I still think there are a few deficiencies. The inability to change playlists and browse your songs via this 7-inch touchscreen really is a problem. The overall integration between this screen, that joystick, and this 8-inch screen above it still seems a little bit awkward sometimes. The fact that you have to use this screen to browse your iPod, well, this screen is showing you, track information as well as allowing you to go forward and backward, just seems a little bit peculiar. Also, the graphics on this 8-inch navigation screen aren't as snazzy as they are in the German competition or that Volvo as well. However, they are a little bit nicer than the Cadillac CUE system. And while I'm talking about Cadillac CUE, we should also add My Ford Touch in there, because this system, even though it doesn't seem quite fully baked, is much, much more reliable than My Ford Touch, My Lincoln Touch, or Cadillac's CUE system. My Ford Touch, My Lincoln Touch, and CUE crash very regularly. Every time we've had a car with those systems in them, they've crashed on us multiple times during the week. No time has this system ever crashed, and none of the essentially similar systems in any of the modern Acura or Honda products that use the same software setup have ever crashed like that. In addition, they have the same ability in terms of voice commands as CUE and My Lincoln Touch. So there's really very little functional difference between those two systems and this AcuraLink system. But in the AcuraLink system, we get that improved reliability, which I think is important, because if this is your daily driver, your commute vehicle, having the system crash and then be unresponsive for 5 or 10 minutes in your commute is a real bummer. Because Acura is making a big deal out of their safety systems on this new RLX, we're going to take a look at them before we go right into the normal drive section of this review. Now, our apologies for not having an exterior mounted camera. One of our GoPros fell off a car last week, and so we're down to just one and the normal camera. So this is a view of the inside of the car, so you can see the steering wheel on this lane keeping assist as it keeps us in our lane. We're going to do this when there's not a car next to us, but if I let go of the steering wheel, you can see that the car is steering us into our lane. See there, it's providing almost enough force to keep us in the lane. Right there is letting us know that there was a lane departure, and it tells you, of course, to put your hands back on the wheel. But this is an interesting and different method of doing this than you'd find in Nissan Infiniti products and a number of the other systems on the market, because this is actually using the steering wheel in the car to steer you back in your lane, rather than using the brakes on the left or the right side of the car to sort of crab you back in your lane. So if we try this again, we just let go of the steering wheel here, you can see that the car is providing the force to sort of hug that right lane, or right lane line here on the right side of the car. And again, the hands are not on the wheels, you can see in both pictures here, and yet we're cruising along right in the lane. The car is now reminding us that steering is required, which is probably a good recommendation. One more word about the lane keeping assistance system that is now steering this vehicle around this corner, totally hands-free, is that it's always providing assistance to your steering input when it's enabled. You enable it with this little button on the steering wheel. That's very different than other systems on the market, which only provide steering input if they think that you're going to exit your lane. So the supposed example of this system is sort of a marble in a horseshoe-shaped trough that as you go closer to the edge, it provides more and more and more assistance. Of course, by using your turn signal to change lanes, the system allows you into that next lane and then resumes its activity in this lane. It's a very odd feeling to get used to. It does become a bit more natural after you've been driving the RLX for a while, but if you're test driving one of these, you have to know that the feeling is very peculiar right up front, because it feels like the car is constantly tugging the steering wheel one way or the other, trying to keep you in that center of the lane. Again, it's always providing some sort of suggestion or a little bit of assistance to try and keep you centered. You won't find full speed range adaptive cruise control in the Lincoln or the Cadillac, but you will find it in BMW, Volvo, and Mercedes vehicles. They do exactly the same thing. However, those systems, all three of them, are smoother to operate than this system. The way the Acura deals with the brake and accelerator input is just a little bit unusual. It brakes a little bit late, brakes a little bit hard, accelerates a little bit late, and all in all drives a little bit strangely, if I'm honest. I mean, it doesn't drive like a regular person would be driving the car, and I find it more distracting than useful, if I'm honest. Part of the adaptive cruise control system is Acura's collision mitigating braking system. This car will automatically apply the brakes for you to reduce the severity of an accident. Not prevent an accident, just reduce its severity if it believes that you're going to hit the car in front of you and there's really nothing that you can do about it. So if it thinks that you've passed the point of no return, the car will automatically apply the brakes for you. Again, it won't prevent the collision, it's only designed to reduce the severity of that accident. The car also warns you if you're too close to a car or if you need to take action yourself to avoid an accident by flashing a braking required screen in between the tachometer and the speedometer, and of course flashing this small LED cluster that reflects off the windshield above the instrument cluster. You can sort of see the outline up there on the dashboard. It's very similar to the Ford and the Volvo system, and it's quite effective. It's much more effective than the other warning systems that are strictly instrument cluster only, because you're hopefully looking out the windshield, and so you'll see that more readily than you would something down there in the instrument cluster. Out on the road, there's no denying that the RLX is a front-wheel drive car. It's pretty obvious when you're driving out here on these winding mountain roads. However, Acura does a very good job at front-wheel drive chassis, and the RLX is probably the pinnacle of their research and development, thanks to that rear-wheel steering. Because of the rear-wheel steering, the RLX feels more like an all-wheel drive car, even though the rear wheels aren't powered. So going around corners like this, adding a little bit of power, the rear wheel steering system, which is coordinated with the entire drivetrain module in this car, allows the rear end of the car to pivot and turn more like you would expect a rear-wheel drive car to do. However, you still get a little bit of torque steer and a little bit of plowing just because there's extra weight up front. In terms of straight line performance, we clocked 0 to 60 in 5.72 seconds, which is respectable for a front-wheel drive car. We can thank those fairly wide tires up front for helping out with that. However, I do believe that all-wheel drive would make this car go faster, and that's just because the car spends a decent amount of time spinning those front wheels. In the corners, the RLX feels very confident with a very high level of road holding ability. However, the feeling is a little peculiar. It doesn't feel as confident as the all-wheel drive Acura TL with super handling all-wheel drive, or as the old RL did. The feeling is just very unusual. Because of that four-wheel steering, you get the rear end rotating in a corner like you would associate with a rear-wheel drive car under a little bit of power, and yet you get the front wheels scrabbling for traction like you'd associate with a front-wheel drive car, except that you don't have that same front-end plowing feel that you'd get in a regular front-wheel drive car. So it's a very unusual combination of things going on here. The benefit of not having that heavy super handling all-wheel drive system, of course, is fuel economy, and the EPA rates the 2014 RLX for 20 in the city, 31 on the highway, and 24 combined. We've been averaging between 23 and 24 miles per gallon in mixed driving, which is better than the old RL. It's also significantly better than the all-wheel drive twin-turbo variants from the competition. There are two problems with the RLX. One of them you'll probably get used to, and that's the steering feel. It is lifeless and vague thanks to electric power steering, but also the rear steering gives it a peculiar feel that you won't find in another car. It feels like the car's steering isn't quite as accurate, but I think that the real problem is that the engineers have tuned the steering to be incredibly accurate, and that's really what you're feeling. It's something that you'll probably get used to over time with the RLX, even if you drive another car that doesn't have rear steering in it on a regular basis. What you won't get used to, however, is the ride quality in the RLX. It's a very mixed bag, and a very strange one at that. The car seems to combine two-mode dampers, and that's something that Acura does talk about. They don't really say how those two-mode dampers work. It's not an electronic active system like you'd find in the Germans. These are just regular old struts and shocks that have two different mechanical dampers in them for different situations. And then it combines those with fairly stiff springs. So this is more stiffly sprung than you'd find in some of the competition, but it feels that the roll bars aren't quite as stiff. So there's a decent amount of body roll, a decent amount of tip and dive and float in this car, but then at the same time, the ride quality is unexpectedly rough and harsh, especially over broken pavement surfaces. Sometimes the chassis seems to be a little bit upset by that and lose its composure. It's a very unusual feeling in this segment, not something that I expected out of Acura, not something that you'd experience in the old RL or the current generation Acura TL either. The 2014 RLX is a well-crafted luxury sedan that handles well, has decent fuel economy, performs fairly decently out on the road for a front-wheel drive luxury car. However, things fall apart just a little bit when we start talking about price. And that is important because we can't talk about cars and their features in a vacuum. The RLX starts at $48,450 and ends at $60,450. We really don't know how much that hybrid will cost, but I expect it to be a decent amount more, which makes the RLX a decent amount more expensive than those other options. It's $5,000 to $10,000 more expensive than that Volvo S80, even though the Volvo S80 has all-wheel drive and a more powerful twin-turbo engine. It's also $5,000 to $10,000 more expensive than the Lincoln MKS, which again has a more powerful twin-turbo V6. Things are a little bit better when you compare it to the Cadillac XTS. Things start out about $4,000 more expensive than that Cadillac for the RLX, but that twin-turbo Cadillac will run you about $73,000 fully loaded. So only when you compare it to that Cadillac XTS does the Acura RLX seem like a decent deal. Overall, the 2014 Acura RLX is a good car, but I think that Acura priced it just too high to be a great car or to be terribly competitive in this segment. Because at the price point of this Acura RLX and its lack of power and lack of handling prowess due to that loss of all-wheel drive, I really don't find a compelling reason to buy the RLX over any of its direct competitors, and that even includes that 7-year-old Volvo S80. Thanks for joining me while we took a look at this 2014 Acura RLX luxury sedan. Be sure and click that subscribe banner at the bottom of your screen so you can be updated on all of my latest videos. Go ahead and comment on this video, tell me what you liked and what you didn't like. You can also send me a message right here on YouTube and request certain vehicles for us to review, because we do take viewer requests into consideration. And be sure and check back with us next week, because we're going to have the all-new 2014 Chevy Impala sedan.